Yes, so Hairless here. This is Daybreak by DIMASH. There are two versions of this song that have been recommended to me, but it's this Bastau 2017 concert version that has been recommended many more times. So that's the one we're going to go with today. The other version was from the competition show I Am a Singer, and I've been told in the comments that DIMASH was ill leading up to that performance. So I have that version to look forward to for a future reaction. A bit of background on this song. It's a song composed by Han Hong. It has a really heartbreaking backstory. I'm sure many of you know this already, but for those of you who don't, to summarize, there was a cable car crash. So a cable car fell into a gorge. Some survived, some didn't. One of the survivors was a 2-year-old child because his parents held him up as the impact happened. The parents sacrificed themselves. They didn't make it, but the child did. This child, now orphaned, was adopted by this song's composer. Extremely sad, so I imagine this could be quite a heart-wrenching performance. Because of this story, I think subtitles will definitely be necessary. Alright, let's get straight into it.
那双无助的眼，住在那美丽风景残斑的地方，不停地一声追想，振翅山谷。就是那个秋天，才看不到爸爸的脸，他用他的秋天托起我重生的起点，黑暗中泪水上满了双眼，不要离开，不要伤害，我看到爸爸妈妈就这么走。
Let's do a pause here. I'll try and do probably 3 pauses in this. The performance is about 4 minutes long. It's a tough one. So far, I really love the music. We'll go over and talk about that in a second. The subject matter, it's difficult to cope with. And the imagery that I'm getting from the music because of that, well, let's go over this a little bit. If you don't want to hear my analysis, go to the timestamp here. So the music starts and then immediately we hear this. The back and forth between the supertonic and the minor third. Supertonic just means the second note. We are in E, so the supertonic is this note. And the minor third is the third note, which dictates that things are minor, sad, as opposed to major, happy. So we're moving back and forth between notes 2 and 3. This rapid alteration conjures up imagery in my head of a cable car kind of swaying in the wind back and forth. Just a quick point here, they showed the piano, but what he's playing or what we're seeing is not matching up with the music that we're hearing. Is there another piano somewhere, or is the video just out of sync? Anyway, there's something really foreboding about the music, especially now that I know the backstory. Listen out, we hear these screams from the fans. They're obviously elated to be seeing DIMASH live, but it's making me think of the screams that must have been happening by the people in the cable car as it was falling. You know, the terror, the fear. I find these live performances interesting because the audio engineers, they could remove those screams, I'm sure, but they've decided to keep them in this performance, or at least this video on YouTube. The music as well really contributes to the overall dark feeling that I'm getting. So what do we hear at this point? The chord at this moment is F major. But we hear this supertonic note number 2 again in the violins. This creates a suspension. A suspension being when one note clashes with the other notes in the chord, as this one does here, causing tension. And then it resolves by moving to a note that doesn't clash with the chord, thereby releasing the tension. But just as the tension is released, we hear a chromatic rise in the bass part. So the bass is going, which is definitely a foreboding feeling. Chromatic inflection in the depths of this musical texture. And then Dimash's vocal entry is sort of announced by this gorgeous scale arpeggio hybrid piano part rising all the way up the piano. This is what we're hearing. When he starts singing, the music is powerful. Staccato, pizzicato like plucked strings, contrasting his legato smooth singing. And his melody is moving slowly downwards in pitch. Again, it just gives me this idea of a falling, the cable car falling. He then goes down to this note, this A, which is pretty much towards the bottom of a baritone's expected range. So that's the local lowest note, and then he moves up from that note, from here to here. And this second note is now the root of that chord. The note is B and the chord is B major. But the note he was singing before, the low note, that A, it remains. It's just been transferred to the strings higher up to create what is called a B dominant 7th chord. Nearly all of the music so far, the chords, the harmonic progressions, they all contain these impure notes. Notes that don't fit in the traditional chord, and they're there to mitigate any sort of idea of resolution. There's always one note in each chord that we seem to be hearing that stands out, that makes it non-standard, non-resolved. To me, this is done to really kind of maintain this idea of anguish, of agony, of stress almost. I'm not sure of the correct word, but you know what I mean. Just after that, Dimash moves into the upper registers of his chest voice. Well, upper for mortals, not for him. He starts off using this airy voice that I always say makes moments in music much more emotional. He used this a lot in my last reaction, which was I Love Only You, when he was only 18 or 19 years old. Do watch that if you haven't seen it yet. It will be in the pinned comment. A lot of people commented saying that they'd never seen that Dimash video before. And he uses it a lot as well in what's probably my favourite Dimash performance so far, Ikke. This airy sound. Air is coming out along with the actual audible notes. It's a weaker sound. You know, when it comes to pained singing, you can go for a more powerful sound, more raw emotion, possibly emulating screaming or anguish cries, or this weaker, airy sound, which I think is more deflated, more of a defeated kind of feeling. The lyrics, I saw my father's face for the final time. His strong shoulders raised me back to safety. In the middle of that, Dimash changes to a bit more of a full sound. There's less air in the voice, but then towards the end of the phrase, he moves back to the airy voice. That is a conflicted feeling. Is it a stronger sound or a weaker sound? The lyrics are talking about his father's strong shoulders lifting him to safety, but that's ultimately what kills his father. You know, it's as insanely a heroic and heartbreaking as an action can be. Hence the conflict in the musical sound created by Dimash. Alright, it's some sad stuff here. Let's carry on. Whoa, okay. Oh yeah, looks like we're about 2/3 through. Dimash is probably going to go high now, isn't he? Let's do our second pause there because there were some things from that previous minute or so that we watched that I'd like to go over. If we go back from where we left off, suddenly we then move to a more powerful sound. That's the same musical phrase that we just paused at actually a moment ago. But Dimash makes this sound so easy. He's singing that in his chest voice, in his full voice. Maybe there's a tiny bit of blend in there, but definitely mostly his chest voice. That's an A up here, 2 octaves above the lowest note we heard him sing. And that's nearly the top of a tenor range, you know? When Dimash sings it, it just seems so much lower than if someone else were to be singing it. And yeah, I just can't get the imagery of falling out of my head. The water in the background, as magnificent as it is shooting up, it's then falling back down. The music, his melody here, we get a lot of repeated notes, but each time a repeated notes happen, they're a bit lower than they were before. Falling. The bass line that we hear as well, overall, it's descending. All of this, every bit of music that we're hearing, it's all moving towards one standout moment. But first, before the standout moment, we get this. A unison note, just one single note being heard in both Dimash and the instrumentation. It's quite a peculiar musical sound, considering the depth of the texture and the harmony that we've been hearing before this, and as well as the power that we've been hearing in the sound before this. And then suddenly, this peculiarity and contrast definitely catches our attention. So it has our full attention for the standout moment. It's daybreak. What does daybreak mean? Like a new day. And it's like with this new day, we have a new musical feel as well. It's more modern. We have electric guitars being prominent now. We're moving away from the orchestral sound that we had before. And this new wave of music, no doubt, in my mind anyway, it's representative of the orphaned child's new life now that is ahead of him after this tragic accident. Rhythmically as well, what we're hearing is the stressed rhythms. Da 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 da. If we compare it to before, much more modern, I'd argue more energetic, but also a bit more agitated, just different to what we heard before. Alright, and then just before we paused, we got this run in the guitar, which is the new prominent instrument. That's interesting because it outlines the scale of A major. At least the first handful or so of notes do. With this note being the major determinant over minor. Let's listen at half speed so we can really hear those guitar notes. The rest of the music at this point is in A minor, so we get this strange major-minor clash. It just stood out to me quite a bit. I'm getting undertones of confusion and I can't help think, well, maybe the confusion that the child was probably feeling at this moment. Yeah, I mean, a lot of interesting things going on, so let's carry on now until the end. We looked like Dimash was about to kick off with the upper registers. He had that repeated E. So let's see what happens here. We know that he loves going high towards the endings of some of his music that we've seen before. Well, Daybreak, powerful song. And unlike some of the other powerful songs we've heard by him where everything remains quite calm and soft and that deflated kind of airy sound I was talking about, here there's a lot of powerful music, electric guitar, strong beats, massive contrasts, you know. Yeah, very, very interesting. Very, very interesting song. Alright, well, let's just go over a few final things from that last section we just heard. From where we carried on, DIMASH was using that strained sounding blended voice for the higher notes. I always say that he seems to use this for the more anguished parts of the music, more when someone might be screaming as opposed to the deflated feeling. Straight up to this E. The music, understandably, is very minor here, with minor being sad and major being happy. Shortly afterwards, talking about building them a beautiful garden. It's now major, albeit temporarily. We're hearing this nice D chord. And this repeated phrase that DIMASH sings, to me it's the bass line that really stands out as the moving force. The bass line goes... And then immediately after that, this is where he makes the change, that switch from the blended, pained sounding voice, as I call it, to the more vibrant, rich countertenor sound. Or I should call it male soprano. I mean, he goes up to the E above this E. So a third above here. That's just one note under the high note from the famous Queen of the Night aria. But I haven't used that clip in a while in my DIMASH videos. And there's something about this overall image here. The falling water in the background, kind of like rain. Him singing in this angelic head voice. And then we get a melodious guitar in the background as well. The music here, well just after that, a few seconds after that, is designed to cause anxiety in us, for sure. Not in a bad way, but just temporarily, you know, to hit the feelings a bit harder. DIMASH suddenly drops down in pitch quite significantly, and he's also changing his voice type back to his chest voice. We hear the guitar very high up just suddenly stop, and then that immediately transfers into a kind of screeching sound in the violin. And the violin way up there is falling chromatically. The guitar stops on this note, and then the violin. So the guitar hands over to the violin, but then when we add in DIMASH's note, and if we bring it up, look at this clash. Very, very discordant, designed to agitate us. And then towards the end, another knee slam by DIMASH. I've not seen that in a while. And then DIMASH's final phrase to end. Airy voice into a more full sound, this head voice, and then finally an airy voice to finish. Yeah, I mean, obviously a horrifically tragic story, really. And Han Hong, who wrote this song, having been so directly involved with it, just had so many emotions that she must have channeled into this composition. Very clever song. I think it conjured up a lot of imagery for me. It might not have been the same for you, but because of the backstory, all these things in the music was just creating these horrific images in my mind. DIMASH as well couldn't have a better person to sing it. Well, let's leave it there. Thank you to everyone who recommended this one to me. Would very much appreciate a like, comment, and subscribe. If you enjoy my content, want to support me, join the community, vote on future polls, you can do so by joining the Patreon or YouTube memberships linked below, and I will see you next time.